All right, next handout you should have is the witchcraft handout. And here, again, so we're going from sort of general discussions now to a more specific discussion here of witchcraft as a group. Now, why witchcraft? And then distinguish it from neopaganism. It's for this reason, because as we separate these out, technically witchcraft is just one type of neopaganism, but it's one of the most prominent kinds of neopaganism that we're going to find. So it's like when we talk about cults, Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses are the two most prominent ones. So you could talk forever about the number of little groups. You talk about, the most prominent ones first. So witchcraft is one of the most prominent ones. So we talk about that first. So where neopaganism would be the genus, witchcraft is a species, okay, of neopaganism. It's a subcategory of a larger category, but it's one of the most prominent ones. So that's the relationship between witchcraft and neopaganism. Now, the connection, this is important here, between witchcraft and magic. Okay. Talked about, a magical worldview and the fact that the Bible prohibits these magical practices in Deuteronomy 18 and so forth. But here's the connection is that, first of all, when people who practice witchcraft, and I'll get to the various types in a minute, the point is almost every kind of witch practices some kind of magic that's inherent in the witch's worldview. But what's important for us is to realize that not every witch practices every kind of magic. And as I said, so if you're going to try and evangelize someone, you got to realize first, let them tell you what they do. Because as soon as you impute a belief to them, they're going to say, well, you don't know what you're talking about, and they won't listen to anything else you have to say. And I got doing this for a while. I've seen people have made those mistakes. So while this is also a tip, we need to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves, but also you don't want to know any more about this than what you need to evangelize someone. It's evil. It's connected with the demonic. As I said, the idea of having an excessive and unhealthy interest in it, I have worked with people 25 years ago who had an excessive and healthy interest in them. We were doing ministry together. But this guy loved witches, occultism. This guy's since fallen from the faith. He just got away from that. And again, I could give you the connection there, but just to say that's someone who had an excessive and unhealthy interest in it. He bought all of these occult books and spell books, and he kept them in his house. And it's like, I don't want anything to do with that kind of stuff. And there's good reasons for it, too. I think you can make a good case that demons do associate themselves with certain occult objects. And remember, Jesus cast that legion of demons into a herd of swine. And so they can inhabit all sorts of objects. So there, as they say, that's the first instance of deviled ham in the Bible. But there, what do you have is that, look, demons can inhabit more than people. They can inhabit pigs. They can inhabit, there's some good arguments. The idea of Paul's in 1 Corinthians 10, where he talks about they sacrifice to demons and not to God. He's connecting the demons with the idols. So the idea of an inanimate thing. So that's why, for me, I take a minimalist approach to this. I want to know enough to minister to the person, but I don't want anything to do with the rest of it. So that's why we want to be cautious about this. Now, so when I say that, we're studying the different types of magic. The modern witchcraft revival. The point is, it actually started in the UK with Gerald Gardner. And it started really sort of secretly in the 1940s. But Gardnerian witchcraft was really the first type. And then when England repealed its anti-witchcraft laws in 1951, that's when you started to see all these groups go public now and start publishing their books. So now you had Gardnerian witchcraft, which it's one of the larger forms of it, but reintroduces the notion of magic and goddess worship with the horned god and a number of these types of practices. So there's, again, different types of these things that go on and how they understand magic. again, you have to ask them what they believe. Some people think it's moral. Some people think it's not moral. So you hear people talk about black witchcraft versus white witchcraft versus gray witchcraft. And in other words, white witchcraft would be, well, I do it for good. The black ones do it, say I do it for evil. But some of the witches reject that view, and they say it's more like a kaleidoscope. There's many colors of magic, right? So that's why you just don't want to fit them in any one category. Or the more classic kind of magic, ceremonial magic. If you look at medieval ceremonial magic, that's where we get these concepts of, Merlin, Dumbledore, people like that with, the pointy hats and the wands and, these ritual ceremonies and Latin. All of that, because the very notion of these complex rituals and ceremonies, that's part of traditional ceremonial magic. Again, not everybody practices that. So the whole point is, and again, when you talk to anybody, either in a cult or in an occultic group, don't assume it's uniform. See, I always ask someone, they say I'm a witch, I ask, well, what kind of witch are you? And most are like, oh, I'm a Gardnerian witch, or I'm a ceremonial witch, or I'm a hermetic witch, or something like that. So you may not even know what they are, but the fact that you ask the question, you know that there's more than one kind of witchcraft out there. And the point is you start to build more credibility with them and speaking with them on the subject. So again, same thing whether I talk to Mormons. I'm a Mormon. Well, which kind? There's over 100 Mormon denominations. They're like, oh, you know something about us. Okay. So it gives you a little bit more credibility. Now, I already mentioned the connection between the occult and demons as far as that goes. So I'm going to skip to the next part. And that is, we think about the modern witchcraft revival and contemporary witchcraft. Probably the takeaway from this is that if there's anything true about witchcraft, is it's pluralistic. Okay, you're not going to find only one version of it. So, and it's relativistic. You're not going to find a witch generally that believes in some notion of absolute truth. What they're going to believe is that the world of the goddess, which is in neopaganism generally, but witchcraft particularly, they would hold to its goddess worship. Okay, the traditional notion of there's a goddess, and sometimes she has a consort, the horned god. Okay. So this is why, in the modern witchcraft era, so this is why what they're doing is, it's part of it is, they'll say it's associated with the goddess Diana, or the god of the moon. And this is why they go out, at full moons or new moons, because that's where they're getting their magic or their power from the goddess Diana, and that they will go out and have their ceremonies, and that one of the ways they'll talk about doing their magic is what they call drawing down the moon. So they'll be open in an open field somewhere and having their ceremony with full moon going on. But the idea is that's supposed to represent magical or goddess power. And then what they're doing at that time is asking the goddess to possess them so they can do their magic. And they call it drawing down the moon, so they can, again, imbibe the power to turn around and use it for whatever their own ends are. And again, but that's common, but not every witch believes that. But that's a common practice. But so in pluralism, lots of different kinds of witchcraft, lots of different kinds of practices. Same thing with relativism. What are you going to hear? That's your truth. They literally are moral relativists. They're metaphysical relativists. They believe that everybody's got their own worldview because they actually believe there's multiple layers of reality, or you can create your own reality. So, because I say that because sort of a lot of traditional notions of witchcraft in the church is that somehow the witches all believe the same thing. They get together, they wear black, they ride around on brooms, right? No, it's literally as varied as you could possibly imagine. So, next, the witch's worldview. Like general occultism, there are witches who are atheists. There are witches who are polytheists. They believe in many gods. But even though they would worship, say, the goddess, there are witches who are monistic, that they believe, or pantheistic. They believe everything is divine. And then there's some real specialized views like hylozoism and animism. Hylozoism is that even inanimate things are alive in some active sense. So everything you can draw power from it. Okay. So the point is, you ask a witch, what do you believe? Okay? And you got to let them tell you. So the point is multiple worldviews. Next page, look at page 2. The theoretical framework and practices of witchcraft. And as I said here, what you've got as far as the practices, I mentioned this already in the initial talk I gave on occultism, but their framework for practicing this is going to be everything from atheism to a hierarchy of entities to psychic forces, you name it. So when they do that, remember, ultimately their charge, or the charge of the goddess, is to essentially pursue the goddess ways or the Wiccan ways. And if there's probably anything true about Wicca, is you'll find that there are no truths, except for they have what they call their Rede, R-E-D-E, which is sort of their one rule, which is as long as you harm none, do what you will. Okay? Now, in practice, what does that mean? It means do what you want. Why? Because who gets to decide what harm is? The individual witch. And I probably note at this point that, remember, those who practice witchcraft, both males and females are called witches, at least traditionally. These whole witch warlock thing that we see in the movies. Some individual coven might decide that females are witches or males are warlocks, but generally everyone's a witch who's part of the coven or part of the group. So that would include males and females. So again, they might be impressed that you know that. So, but ultimately, what you want to get to is the biblical understanding of it. And as far as the critiques and how we work in this, again, to come back to this a little bit, remember the bottom line is you've got to have some magic. There's different kinds of witchcraft. And then what we've got is non-dogmatism. Okay? I mean, if you look at these things, we'll look at what this means, because a lot of these are going to be similar to what's in neopaganism. But let's go back to what the Bible says about witchcraft. In page 2, it says a biblical view of witchcraft. Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12 is as clear as crystal. When you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you, do not learn to imitate the detestable things. Again, sorcery, witchcraft, divination, making sons or daughters pass through the fire, spiritism. So all of those practices, those magical practices that are inherent in witchcraft, God forbids. As I said in the last section, I said I actually witnessed to a witch, and she claimed to be part of the Hermetic order. And the long and short of that story is, every time I'm doing ministry in this, usually with someone in the occult, it's because someone finds out that this wasn't, these aren't people or things that are actually friendly to me in the end. And this witch was practicing an invisibility ritual with a friend in her coven house. This is the story she relayed to me. And she claimed that as her friend and she were practicing this ritual, her friend went in the other room and started screaming like she was on fire. She ran in to look and said all she could see was the outline of her. And all she could do was hear her screaming like she's in agony. So she got totally, freaked out, to use a phrase, grabbed literally her spell books, her crystal ball, her magic wand, her potion ingredients, ran out and started calling churches. Help! This is the one that had a Christian background, because she realized there was actually something wrong with this now. Problem is, she called about 10 or 12 churches and like, you're a witch and there's demons. No, we don't do that stuff. So eventually they got a hold of a friend of mine that he called me, and we went and met with her. And that's when she started giving her background. Long and short of it is that she's trying to say that God approves of some kind of witchcraft, like white witchcraft. Says no, any of these things are an abomination to God. There is no acceptable form of witchcraft. She read this, she understood it, and again, the conviction of the Spirit led her to say, I don't want to be a witch anymore. And I say that because, by the way, the guy who called me then was the guy I used to work with, where she asked us when she was done, hey, you guys want all my stuff? I'm like, I don't want it. And my friend was going, yeah, I want this stuff. So he was keeping the spell books and the magic wand. Like, dude, burn that stuff, man. Listen to it scream when you burn it. I don't think so. So that's the first critique. And then note in Galatians 5:20, where it looks at the deeds of the flesh as opposed to the fruit of the Spirit. One of the things in the deeds of the flesh is witchcraft or sorcery. So again, that's the kind of thing. People with this lust for power are going to be attracted to some form of this. And that's why we want to be very cautious about it. Now next, a biblical critique of the witch's worldview. I already mentioned 1 Samuel 15, where rebellion is of the sin of witchcraft. And now that's going to be also inherent to all forms of occultism. But I want you to look at Isaiah 47, because this nicely sums up what happens to those who practice witchcraft in the end. And the context of Isaiah is the people of God, ultimately, and the people surrounding areas of Babylon, they weren't giving Yahweh his due. They were turning to the sorcerers, the mediums, the spiritists, and for us, you got to remember, a lot of people who say they're Christians are practical atheists, because we say we believe in God, but we live as if God doesn't exist, that He really is our Creator and our Lord, and that we owe Him allegiance. And we end up trusting the created things rather than the Creator. And in every case, if you're trusting the creation rather than the Creator, the end is destruction. But here, this was a culture that had turned to the paganism and the mysticism of the day. And what does it say? Isaiah 47, verse 8, it says, "Now then, hear this, you sensual one, who dwells securely, who says in your heart, I am, and there is no one besides me." Now, why is that key? Because God, a couple of verses earlier, said, who is He? God says, I am, and there is no one besides me. In other words, you think you're God. You think you can control your circumstances. You think you can do whatever you want. But He says, I shall not sit as a widow. Okay, and this is the person deceiving themselves. No, nor shall I know the loss of children. But these two things shall come on you suddenly in one day, loss of children and widowhood. They shall come on you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries, in spite of the power of your spells. You felt secure in your wickedness and said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and your knowledge, they have deluded you. For you have said in your heart, I am, and there is no one besides me. Now again, turn that back to 1 Samuel 15. Okay, rebellion is of the sin of witchcraft. You're making yourself your own God. I am, and there is no one besides me. That was the promise of the devil to Eve in the Garden of Eden. The day you eat from the fruit, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. You don't have to submit to God anymore. You can be your own God and make it up for yourself and control reality. But then he says, verse 11, but evil will come on you, which you will not know how to charm away, and disaster will fall on you, for which you cannot atone, and destruction about which you do not know will come suddenly. So God is now mocking them in verse 12. Stand fast now in your spells and in your many sorceries with which you have labored from your youth. Perhaps you'll be able to profit. Perhaps they may cause trembling. You're wearied with your many counsels. Let now the astrologers who prophesy by the stars, those who predict by the new moon, stand up and save you from what is to come. Behold, they have become like stubble. Fire burns them. They cannot deliver themselves from the power of the flame. There is no coal to warm by, and no fire to sit before. So have those become to you, with whom you have labored, whom you have trafficked with from your youth. Each has wandered his own way. There is none to save you. Now that's powerful. I get chills when I read that. You trust that in the end when you realize destruction's coming. There is none to save you. You've trusted in yourself. You've trusted in magic. You've trusted in something. And all of a sudden, pain, suffering, destruction is coming. And that sense of despair and hopelessness, there's none to save you. I mean, talking about being in despair, I mean, that's as bad as it gets. So our time is up with this, but we end with that biblical warning.